Let's speak now to Ralph Schoellhammer, who's a political theorist from Vienna over in Austria. Ralph, great to have you back on the programme. Now, we know
Great to
that
be with you, Alex.
Last week there was an announcement from the OECD, the most developed countries on this here little planet, that Britain is top of the charts when it comes to basically what they call permanent type immigration. So people who come here with no intention of leaving, people who come here to move here permanently. And rather than popping the champagne over this, I thought that was a pretty rubbish table to top. And yet here's our Prime Minister again, not being able to put a cap on it. It seems to me, and you're the political theorist here, that what I understand from people connected to the previous administration is when a Prime Minister would go and sit in Cabinet and say, right, we've got to bring down immigration, you'd have the Minister for Health saying, well, you can't do it for the NHS. We need the foreign doctors. We need the foreign nurses. OK. You get an exception. Then DEFRA would say, you can't do it in agriculture. No. Farmers need to bring in workers from abroad. OK, right, we won't put any limits there. Then the Secretary for Business said, well, you can't do it in hospitality. There'll be no people to work in pubs and restaurants and as baristas. OK, right, well, we better not do it there. By the time the conversation's gone round the table, guess what? There's no cap on migration. Surely, if the levels of immigration, which are totally unsustainable to the UK, are going to be brought under control, exactly what we do need, come what may, whatever the fallout may be, is a cap from the top.
Well, I mean, I will begin with the first observation. What you just said is I'm pretty sure that in 1861, when Abraham Lincoln suggested to abolish slavery, that many people said, but without slaves, who's going to pick cotton, right? Who's going to work in agriculture? So if the argument is we need mass migration because there are menial jobs that nobody else is willing to do, then we have a completely different structural problem. I don't buy the NHS argument. I don't buy the agricultural argument. There are plenty of people both in continental Europe, but also in the UK, right, that if you create the right incentives, they will do those jobs. I mean, I think this idea that you have to import a permanent underclass to do the jobs that are supposedly the jobs that the British people won't do, I think then the problem is how do you get people to want to do these jobs? You have to create working conditions. You have to bring down housing prices. You have to make life affordable again, right? If life in Britain would be more affordable, you could live a good life also on a smaller salary. So this is kind of using excuses for problems they themselves created. I don't accept this. And the argument I heard now that Keir Starmer wants to produce a white paper, it's the same argument. You don't need a white paper. The laws are all there. A country has the right to decide who comes and who doesn't come, right? This idea you need some special authorization or some white paper. I can give you the white paper right now. The British people want a net migration of 0. It's a post-it if you want. I don't need a white paper. You don't need some consultants and McKinsey or who else to produce this for you. Everybody knows what is needed.
And if you've got net emigration running around, gross emigration figures, running at around the 414,000 figure, so that many people are leaving, the idea of having net immigration net migration would essentially still be 400,000 odd people coming into the country, which would create a level 0. And frankly, that was the sort of figures that should be more than sustainable. Those were the figures that were more than sustainable only about 5 years ago. One thing I thought was really interesting from Sir Keir Starmer's speech is he reflected on the great immigration experiment of the previous administration as something that had been deliberately gamed as a result of Brexit. And they're talking about, oh, yes, it's all about global Britain. And I found that quite interesting, coming from a man who is our Prime Minister, a man who talks about far-right thugs, a man who is the first one to shout accusations of racism at political opponents, because it seemed to me that in that speech he was sort of suggesting there is a hierarchy when it comes to who make better immigrants, whether it's those from the EU or those from outside of the EU, which I just thought was a pretty interesting thing for someone like Sir Keir Starmer to reflect upon.
No, but I think there is a hierarchy, of course. This is my proposal for British immigration policy would be a very straightforward one. There is a moratorium when it comes to migration from not Western countries, because these are the ones, let's be honest, we have the statistics not just from the UK, but from other countries as well, that they cause the biggest problems. They're a net cost to the social system. They're a net cost to the welfare system. But I don't think when we talk about reducing immigration that the British people think about somebody from Ireland moving to the UK. I think that even I, at least in the eyes of your viewers, I hope, would still make the cut if I would want to move to the UK. So we all know what is meant by reducing immigration. So this is not complicated. I can always tell the people the same thing. Don't be gaslit by this. Everybody knows that the solution to this problem is very simple if there would be the political will, but the will is not there. And I'm also afraid, we saw this with your previous guest, with Ben Habib, whom I personally find a very interesting figure. I'm not sure if even Nigel Farage would be willing to do the things that are necessary. I'm very afraid for the UK because no politician, left, right and centre, seems to be willing to make the steps that the British people want, that they justifiably expect, and that are necessary if you still want to be around as a nation in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I am surprised that I'm going to be a little provocative here. We constantly hear about the supposed genocide in Gaza, but let's be very clear about this. I'm pretty sure that in 100 years, there will still be plenty of Palestinians around. I'm not sure how many British people will be around in 100 years. So we have to face this. Do the British people, do the British government, do you want to maintain your culture, your civilization or not? And if the answer is yes, then you have to bring down immigration and you have to bring up domestic birth rates. And in order to do so, you have to create the sense within the population that this is a country where it is worthwhile to have children. That means affordable housing, but that also means that people must have a sense again that being part of the broader historical continuation, the tradition of Britain, is worthwhile to continue. So this is going to be a Herculean task, and I don't see anybody on the horizon willing to do it. By the way, this is not just a British problem. Like, we have the same problem in continental Europe as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, actually, how we compare when it comes to other countries in Europe. Because, of course, especially when it comes to the illegal migration, we're probably one of the, well, not the least badly affected, but we're not as badly affected as, say, Spain, France, Germany. But when it comes to bolstering their own workforces, is pulling the immigration lever something that happens a lot as well in countries like France and Spain?
But they're not bolstering the workforce. I mean, we have the numbers from Germany, we have the numbers from Austria. If more than half of welfare recipients are people that don't have a passport from your country, these people did not come to bolster or save your welfare state. They are the final nail in its coffin. We have very good, the University of Amsterdam did a wonderful study on this and they come to the same conclusion. The finance ministry in Denmark did a study on this, they came to the same conclusion. And what they did is they distinguished precisely what we were just talking about between Western and non-Western immigration. They said Western immigration is a net benefit to the system. Non-Western immigration is in most cases a net cost. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes. There is the occasional, Somali doctor and Syrian high school professor. And all, yes, but what we're interested in is on average. So if you get 10 people, one of them is a doctor and 9 of them are unemployed, that one doctor is not going to shoulder the other 9 unemployment people. It's that simple.
Do you know, Ralph, you make extremely interesting, pertinent comments. I just wish this government would actually publish statistics as they do in countries like Germany, where we can see whether there's been any economic benefits to such unfettered immigration. But I think hell will freeze over before the government own up to some of the things that have been done.
But you can see it. Sometimes it's better to forget about the numbers. I say this very rarely, but in this case, and look what's happening on the ground. Now, take a country like France and look in the so-called Parisian suburbs, the banlieues. If net immigration at that level, as it happened in France and now the UK, would be a benefit, these banlieues would be, examples of entrepreneurial activity, of wealth creation, of safety, of great schools. It's the exact opposite. We see the same in Austria. We see the same in the UK. You know exactly where you have certain concentrations of certain types of migrants, what happens to the system. I mean, whom do you believe, the government or your own lying eyes? That's really the question here.
Well, I think most people don't believe the government anymore, and I think that's been in train for quite a while.